Mr. Ahmad, who's your next witness or witnesses, and what do we need to discuss?
So, Judge, our next witness we expect to be Ricky Burems. He is outside.
And what do we need to discuss?
Regarding John Black, there were two issues. One was, I guess we can deal with it after Mr. Burems, though. Mr. Black is also outside.
Mr. Hubner, any objection to that?
Well, I mean, can we deal with it now so we can just go back to back? Rather than take another break?
Well, how long do you expect Mr. Burems to be?
Maybe a half hour, Judge.
Fine, let's bring the jury in. Let's have Mr. Burems take the stand, please. After him and Mr. Black, who else do you have, whether it's today or tomorrow morning?
We do have the toxicologist. We've also subpoenaed Dr. Kelly for a very brief testimony. We've resubpoenaed Detective...
Counsel, use the mic, please.
Sure, sorry, Judge. Detective Klabundy, the toxicologist, and... What do you mean he's...
Okay, guys, let's not chit-chat amongst ourselves, Mr. Ahmad. So tell me who you're planning the rest of the day, today or tomorrow morning, please.
Judge, we do expect to conclude tomorrow morning. Mr. Edgecomb also would testify likely tomorrow morning. And there's one more officer that we have subpoenaed here. I may need, if Detective Klabundy is not available, then I may need to have Detective Kirkvold.
He's here.
He is here? Okay, he can probably stay.
So 2 or 3 more witnesses and then the defendant, presumably, is that correct?
Yes, we expect that tomorrow morning.
Fine. All right, so have the witness come in.
Judge, there was one record we have to make before Mr. Edgecomb decides to take the stand on the number of priors. That issue is still on the table.
Right. We can address that tomorrow. Let's have the next witness on the stand, and then if we need to take a short break to deal with the testimony from Mr. Black or Dr. Black, we can do that.
Also, before the defendant testifies, in addition to his record, we still need the court's ruling on whether or not the state is allowed to cross-examine. Yeah, sorry. They keep moving. Whether or not the state is allowed to cross-examine the defendant on that one sentence that was stated down in Kentucky about when the detectives say they're here from Milwaukee Police Department and want to speak about what happened in Milwaukee.
Remind me again, I'm not ruling on it now, but what was the one sentence?
Basically, the detectives sit down, speak with the defendant, identify themselves as Milwaukee police detectives who want to speak to him about what happened in Milwaukee, and the defendant states what happened in Milwaukee. I believe that that would be relevant in terms of the fact that A, it's not a question, but B, if the defendant is going to be testifying that he's acting in self-defense, the fact that when 2 detectives come down and tell him that they want to talk to him about...
Microphone, please.
Yeah, I'm trying. When the detectives sit there and state that they want to talk to him about what happened in Milwaukee and he feigns ignorance as to any incident, I think that is appropriate for cross-examination. And the court has not ruled on that yet.
All right, potentially. We'll discuss that tomorrow morning. Let's get the witness in here. We'll have the jury come in. We'll get the next witness testimony done, and then we'll go from there. Yes, the jury's coming in. You can remain seated, please. All right, the jury's back. Sir, if you can stand and raise your right hand so you can be sworn in, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Please be seated, state your full name, spelling first and last for the record.
Thank you. My name is Ricky, R-I-C-K-Y. Last name is B-U-R-E-M-S.
Good afternoon, Mr. Burems.
Good afternoon, sir.
How are you currently employed?
I'm an investigator in the public safety office of a local college.
Okay. And I just want to kind of go back a little bit so that the members of the jury can have an understanding of your previous employment experience.
Yes, sir.
So if you can just kind of start back and just explain to the members of the jury, what was your, have you ever operated in law enforcement before?
Yes, from 1982 until 2014, I was a member of the Milwaukee Police Department. I have 8 years experience uniform patrol, 3 years experience plainclothes drug investigation, and 21 years experience as a detective, including 10 years experience as a homicide detective. I've investigated in the area of 1,000 homicides and probably a couple thousand shootings. The aspects of my investigation includes responding to incidents, conducting scene investigations, witness interviews, interrogations of suspects, location and inventorying evidence, and any other follow-up investigation that's deemed necessary in order to complete the investigation.
Okay. And Mr. Burems, as it relates, well, first, have you ever testified in court before as a part of any of the investigations or duties you had operating in that capacity?
Hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Okay. All right. Now, Mr. Burems, have you had occasion to look over some of the reports and some of the discovery as it relates to this case involving Mr. Edgecomb?
Yes, I have.
Mr. Burems, have you had occasion to look through reports involving how the Milwaukee Police Department handled certain parts of the investigation involved in this case?
Yes, I have.
Now, Mr. Burems, have you found any issue with, based off of the training or experience that you had operating in the capacity with the Milwaukee Police Department in this case?
Yes, I have found some issues in the investigation of this incident.
Okay. Well, Mr. Burems, if you will, I want to just kind of go one by one through some of the issues that you found involving the investigation in this case. Fair enough?
That is fair, sir.
Okay. So, Mr. Burems, let's start with the first issue that well, first of all, if you can explain to the members of the jury, what documents or information did you receive, videos, so forth, that you looked over to discover some of the issues that you found in this case?
I reviewed the scene and the investigation reports filed by various officers in regards to this. I reviewed video from the scene and also some photographs from the scene. And additionally, I went to the scene myself, and the part of the scene I went to was the bridge where this actually happened, just to assess the area for myself so I would have an idea.
And approximately how much time have you invested in looking over some of the issues or documents or information that's germane to this case?
10, 12 hours.
Okay. Now, Mr. Burems, let's start with the first issue that you've come to realize after reviewing information and discovery related to this case?
Well, I think the first issue I had was the investigation of the scene itself. And just understand that homicide investigations are probably considered the most serious investigations that a police department can respond to. And the procedure is that the uniformed officers respond initially. They assess it, and once they determine there's a homicide, they notify the detective bureau, and then the detectives come out to conduct a more detailed investigation. That's what detectives are trained for, to be more detailed in their investigations. There'll be one detective that is dedicated to the scene, and when I say the scene, they'll describe where the evidence is located, where the victim is located, anything that is concerned with that scene, any type of physical evidence. They'll describe that in their report. Additionally, they'll do a diagram indicating where each item was found. They'll take measurements. The measurements are detailed to the extent that if you read those reports 50 years into the future, you should be able to look at those reports and go back and reconstruct that scene based on the detail of that report. And one of the issues that I had is that you have the primary scene where the victim was killed, but then also you have secondary scenes, namely where the traffic incident happened and then where the punch occurred. And although those locations are described cursory in the investigation or in the reports, there should have been a measurement from each of those locations to the primary scene. And the scene where the traffic incident happened is not described at all. There's no address for that. And really, that's kind of how this whole thing started. So to not mention that, to me, is a major problem. Also,
Objection, Your Honor. Is this just a narrative? Can there be a question?
Right, it's a narrative. Let's make it a question and answer, please.
Now, specifically based off of, that initial observation, the failure to take, specific measures and so forth, how does that impact a potential homicide investigation?
because again, you're supposed to be able to refer to those reports and reconstruct the investigation into the future. If you have to testify in court, you should be able to refer to those reports to recall or describe exactly where everything was during the time of your investigation.
Okay. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about, once a homicide occurs, some of the duties of the first arriving officer.
Well, the initial arriving officers are, again, to assess the scene, and in this case, they determined that it was a homicide. First aid to the victim, if it's feasible, securing the scene, and by securing the scene, I mean, usually you've seen the yellow tape. Usually that tape is put up to restrict access to the scene. They locate any witnesses, and if there are any witnesses there, they hold on to them for eventual interview by the detectives. They locate any evidence, and then when the detectives arrive, they brief them on their findings so that, again, the detectives can conduct a more detailed investigation.
Okay. Now, if the arriving officer comes to learn that an item was taken away from the scene or removed from the scene, what is the duty upon that first arriving officer at that point?
Well, if the arriving officer determines that something was taken from the scene, if they can retrieve that item, they should do so. And they should find out what was taken and why it was taken. And they should also inform the detectives or supervisor. But the point is to retrieve the item and find out who took it and why it was taken.
Okay. All right. Now, Mr. Burems, did you find that to have occurred in this investigation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you go to the next issue that you have come to realize as it relates to the investigation in this case?
Well, again, this goes to the scene. And reading that scene report, one of the major issues that I had was that this occurred on a bridge, and there was approximately a 20-foot drop. I went over there and I measured it. And, you know, this is a major aspect because of the possibility of injury or death. And that drop was not even mentioned in the scene report.
Okay. And why is that issue? How does that come to be an issue as it relates to, you know, a case that you could potentially have regarding it?
Well,
Well, I think it's vague, and I think the witness needs to clarify 20-foot drop from where to where, off of where. He said 20-foot drop. Let's clarify.
yes, sir. When I say 20-foot drop, you have the base of the bridge. You have the like the wall that leads to the sidewalk, and if you measure from the sidewalk to the bottom, the distance from the sidewalk to the bottom or to the ground is 20 feet.
And how does that impact a case when it comes to this point? How does that failure affect a potential case?
Well,
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this because I believe this is going beyond the scope of what the court has allowed in terms of this testimony. I think it's getting into an area that's beyond that scope.
Overruled. He can answer this question, and we'll see where it goes.
well, just again, because of if someone is involved in a confrontation, there's the potential that someone could fall off that bridge and injure
Your Honor, I'm
themselves.
going to object. This goes specifically as to he's attempting to testify as to what people were thinking. The court has ruled that out.
Right. The witness cannot testify to what may have been going through the minds of either the defendant or the victim in this case or anyone else. Sustained. That last answer is stricken. Let's move on.
Mr. Burems, would that same risk apply to anyone, or, I mean, is that irregardless to this case? Or was there risk of an individual falling from the 20-foot relative to any investigation that the Milwaukee Police Department has where the incident occurs in that vicinity?
Objection, Your Honor, is to the relevance as to other investigations.
Sustained.
All right, Mr. Burems, what other issues did you find that took place in this?
Well, the interview of Mrs. Cleereman, the officer or the detective who interviewed her described her as being hysterical at the time of the interview. And when you get a witness like that, you want to get as much information from them as you can. But if they are in such an emotional state, you want to go back the next day and re-interview them when they're more calm. And some of the issues that should have been addressed start at the bar where the Cleeremans were before this occurred. I would have wanted to know.
Your Honor, is to the relevance as to what he would wanted to know.
Sustained. Let's ask another question, please.
Mr. Burems, could you testify to what the standard procedures would be having learned that an individual was drinking at a bar?
The standard procedure would be to send a detective to the bar, interview the employees of the bar, find out how much the Cleeremans had to drink, what their attitude or their disposition was when they left, check for any video, because you want to determine whether they had, whether they would be affected by what they had to drink.
Okay. And did you find that to have occurred in this case?
No, no one ever went back to the bar to find out how much they had to drink, what their disposition was when they left the bar.
Now, had that occurred, is there normally some type of report or something that's normally documented in?
Yeah, if it had occurred, it should be in a report. If everything that an officer does during the investigation
He
should
answered
be.
the question. He's not testifying.
Hang on. What's the objection?
He's testifying in a narrative again. It's just paragraphs. I'd like it to be in response to a question, please.
Overruled, but let's just keep it moving, please.
You can continue.
No, it's just everything that an officer does in an investigation should be in a report, and it's well known in police procedure that if there's no report, then it didn't happen. And that's the way you approach these investigations.
Okay. And are there any other issues that you found in this case?
Well, again, back to Mrs. Cleereman, there should have been a reenactment where she's taken to the location where the traffic incident happened, and you note that location, you get an address, then the location where the punch occurred, you note that location, you get an address, and then you take measurements from the distance from the traffic incident to the punch, the traffic incident to the shooting, and the punch to the shooting, so that you have a perspective of what occurred.
Okay. And did you find that to have occurred in this case?
No, I did not.
And how can that potentially affect an investigation or the understanding of what took place when you don't have that?
It gives you an idea of a spatial perspective, how far apart each perspective. It also gives you a time perspective. How long would it take from the accident or the traffic incident to the punch and then the shooting?
Okay. All right. Now, Mr. Burems, what is another issue that you found?
Well, again, back to Mrs. Cleereman, I would have asked why they followed Mr. Edgecomb. What was their intention? Were they upset when they followed him? Why didn't they turn left, which would have taken them home, instead of turning right in pursuit of Mr. Edgecomb? Just to give you an idea what state of mind they were in. Was there any conversation other than we should follow him? Was there any conversation as to, well, what are we going to do when we catch up with him?
And you didn't find that to have occurred in this case, Mr. Burems?
No, not at all.
What other issues did you find?
Well, Mrs. Cleereman went through her husband's pockets after this.
Your Honor.
Sustained.
You can.
Yes, they knew the question.
What other issues did you find, Mr. Burems?
The report lists the locations of several video cameras that stretch over a couple of blocks. And some of the businesses were closed, but each camera that is listed in these reports, there should have been follow-up to go back to those locations to check any footage that was on those cameras in relation to this incident. And if there was no footage, then it should be noted that these cameras were checked, but there was no footage. But certainly, that is a major concern in this investigation, that those cameras were never checked.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a certain type of report that's normally filled out as it relates to seeing if potential camera footage is available?
Yes, it's just a supplementary report, the basic reports that was filed on every aspect of this investigation. An officer or detective should have been assigned that task, and they should have set about that task, and whatever results they got, they should have noted it in the report and made it part of the investigatory file.
So if an officer goes and looks for potential video and they don't find it, whose ultimate responsibility it is to ensure that and notate that actually has occurred and that it was thorough and impartial?
Well, in a homicide investigation, you have the initial investigation and involving the detectives and involving the officers. After that, there's a meeting or a briefing, and in that briefing you determine what has been done and what has not been done and what needs to be done. And everything that has not been done, probably a detective would be assigned to do something like those cameras because it's such an important part of the investigation. And it would be the detective's job to check the footage, write the report, and make a supervisor aware that this follow-up has been done. And if it has not been done, a supervisor should be monitoring the progress on this assignment to ensure that it has been done. And sometimes an investigation or a follow-up like that will have to take course over a few days.
Okay.
But it has to be done.
Now, did you see that type of follow-up, as you described, take place over a course of a few days in this case?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, Mr. Burems, are there other issues that you found as part of your review?
Well, I think one of the major issues that I found was that when you investigate these incidents, you have to be thorough and you have to be objective. You have to look at aspects of every aspect of the investigation. And one of the most troubling things that I saw was a witness was made available, and the detective involved just declined to interview that witness. And if I can just give an analogy, these investigations are like a jigsaw puzzle, and every aspect is a piece. And if one piece of that puzzle is missing, it affects the whole picture. So that's why you have to cover every aspect. You have to be very creative, very resourceful, cover every aspect of these investigations.
Okay. Now, as it relates to, we talked a little bit about video. Were you able to see any video evidence as it relates to the bar where the Cleeremans would have left from, as indicated in the report you reviewed?
No, there was no reports indicating that anyone had even gone back to the bar to interview witnesses.
Sustained.
Mr. Burems, any other issues that you noticed in this investigation?
May I review my notes, please?
Yes.
Thank you. One issue, and again, this goes back to Mrs. Cleereman. She's telling the detective that she and her husband have been at a bar, and then when they leave the bar, she almost hits a bicyclist, and during the investigation, there's an open intoxicant found in the rear of the Cleereman's vehicle. And, as dark as this may sound, I would have given her an intoxilizer test to determine whether or not she was intoxicated or impaired.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. I'm striking that. And you see the lawyers. All right, I had a conversation with the lawyers. There's no evidence in this case that there was an open intoxicant in the vehicle. That can be clarified by defense counsel or the state on cross, but that answer is stricken. Based on the testimony thus far, no one has testified that there was a, quote, open intoxicant. There's been conversations about a can and something that was in the back door, the back seat. Let's move on. That answer is stricken. Next question.
Mr. Burems, after your full review of the investigation of files in this case, any other failures that you've noticed of the investigation in this case?
In regards to the knife in Mr. Cleereman's pocket, I think a DNA sample should have been taken. I think a standard should have been taken from Mrs. Cleereman. In regards to any anything in the car that possibly affected this incident, DNA should have been taken from that too.
And why is that important?
Just to give you a full objective picture of what's going on.
And strike that. Is there anything else that you learned in reviewing?
Well, there were two witnesses who worked at a restaurant who gave an account of this incident. I would have asked them if they had discussed this incident with each other or with anybody else, because sometimes witnesses can influence each other's accounts or statements. So I would have just asked them just to clarify that.
And you didn't see that question being asked as part of your review?
No, I did not.
Okay. Anything else that you found?
And another thing is that when you are getting witness accounts and they tell you what they saw, you want to see what their perspective. If they were across the street, you want to go to where they were and look towards the scene to see if they could actually see what they told you that they saw, just to make sure that their account is accurate.
And did you see that having occurred in this case?
No, I did not.
Anything else, Mr. Burems?
No.
All right, thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Cross.
Did you review all the police reports?
Everything that was available to me, but I can
That
say
wasn't my
that
question.
Hang on. One at a time.
Did you review all the police reports?
all the police reports that were made available to me, I reviewed.
So if I'm understanding this, you are now testifying as to what constitutes a good or bad investigation only on what the defense gave you. Is that correct? Yes or no?
It's a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And in your opinion as to what should or should not have happened, did you ask him for any other reports?
No.
So you were willing to sit here and talk about what you just testified to and base your opinion only on what they cherry-picked for you. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, so you didn't ask anything more. You didn't ask if there was maybe a report or something else that maybe they didn't give you. Is that a yes or no? Did you ask for anything else?
No.
Okay. Did you watch the body cams in this video?
One of them.
One body cam.
Yes.
Who chose that body cam?
The defense.
The defense did. So if we have a state's exhibit that has body cams from several officers going, to the scene, walking up, talking to video, talking to people at a door and finding out that the Ring camera did not record, you never saw that, did you?
No, I did not.
You only saw one body cam that the defense asked you to take a look at. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because that's the one they wanted you to talk about, right? You know what, I'll rephrase that question. You probably can't speculate as to their motives.
No, I can't.
I want to ask about your motives. Did you ever ask for any other body cam?
No, I did not.
Did you ever sit there and say, you know what, in order for me to truly determine whether or not these officers in a record-setting homicide year did everything, I want to watch all their body cam. Did you ever do that?
No, I did not.
Okay. You said you saw some of the photos. Did you look at all the scene photos?
I looked at what was made available to me.
So you don't even know if it's all the scene photos, do you?
No, I do not.
Did you listen to the 911 calls?
I listened to one of them.
Was it again do you know there's 3 911 calls?
Yes, I do.
And you chose to listen to one?
Yes.
Because that's the one they chose for you, right?
Yes.
And they give you a 911 call, you don't ask any other questions, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So I just want to be very clear so that I'm understanding this. All of your opinions that you have just testified to have been based upon solely reports they chose, a body cam they chose, a 911 call that they chose, photos they chose, and not the entire investigation in this case. Am I right?
No, you're wrong.
I'm wrong. So you are basing your decision on the entire investigation without watching all the body cams?
That is correct.
Okay. So you feel that you can, based on what they cherry pick, still come to a conclusion as to the entire investigation?
Based on the reports, yes.
Okay, yes, based on the reports. For example, 830 West, 830, there was a ring camera. Do you remember that in the report?
I would have to review the reports.
Okay, and if the report doesn't mention this, but the body cam shows that the officers actually went there and found out that it didn't record, you'd be unaware of that, wouldn't you?
May I expound?
No, you may answer the question.
You'd be unaware of that, wouldn't you?
Mr. Hubner,
I apologize, Judge.
answer the question, sir. It's a yes or no question that requires a yes or no answer.
Yes, I would be unaware of that.
Okay. And if you were to watch the body cam, you didn't watch the body cam of Officer Manisha Howard, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't see how Officer Manisha Howard sat there in Casablanca watching video backwards in an attempt to find all the possible segments of which the defendant is on the scene?
No, I did not.
You didn't see how on the body cam she worked with the people at Casablanca who have access to cameras down Brady Street, and she watched to see if she could find anything?
No, I did not.
You didn't watch how after being at Casablanca, she gets into her car and goes the next block over to see if she can find any video that she could recover?
No, I did not.
Okay. And you didn't know that all of this happened the very next day, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you see the report where Detective Washington talks about receiving the Casablanca video from her and her partner?
No, I did not.
So when you're talking about how there should be reports about the ongoing next couple days where video is being withdrawn, you said you didn't see them. Here's a report you didn't see, right?
Which one are you referring to?
I'm talking about Detective Michael Washington's report, how the very next day after the homicide, two officers, or at least one officer, Officer Krause, went to Casablanca and obtained video. Did you see that report?
No, I did not.
So when you were testifying that you should have seen reports about people securing video later, is that because nobody showed you that one?
May I expound?
Is it because no one showed you that one? They're going to be able to get you to expound on all the stuff that they did later. I want to concentrate on this.
No, I didn't.
No, it's cross-examination. As you know, you've testified hundreds of times. It's a yes or no answer, yes or no.
Okay. All right. Just another thing. We're talking about this is a homicide investigation at the time. Officers and detectives had no idea who the suspect were at the time, that night, did they?
No.
And in fact, are you aware of how detectives spent a considerable amount of resources attempting to find the flight path of this defendant?
Yes, I am aware of that.
They went to Rat Finks. Did you see that? Finks? Did you see that bar video?
I didn't see the video, but
You
I
saw the
am.
report?
I believe so.
Okay. What about across the street, Bel Air Cantina? Did you see that?
A report regarding that?
Yes.
I would have to
Okay.
look at the report.
And if this were officers and detectives following, going literally store by store, trying to find a possible escape route that this shooter had just taken, that would comply with looking for video, wouldn't it?
Yes or no?
Yeah.
No.
No, it would. So you don't believe looking for video where they're attempting to find the flight path of someone who just shot someone in the face is important?
It is important.
Okay, so they did that in this case, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then even a little bit beyond that, on the bike path on UWM, they went and found video there. Do you remember seeing that?
I believe so.
Okay. And then when the individual pops up on Locust Street, they found that video. Do you remember seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember seeing how they developed and did a search warrant in an attempt to find this suspect?
Yes.
Okay. So detectives spent a significant amount of time attempting to find somebody who had just shot and killed someone in the street. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And are you aware of the fact, you're talking about interviewing of witnesses, did you see Rotrell Cameron's 911 call or the body cam of his interview?
I saw the report in regards to his 911 call.
Okay. What about when he speaks to the officer over the phone?
I believe I saw that report too. I would have to look again, but I believe I saw that.
Okay. And sometimes body cam can provide even a little bit more than what's in the report, right?
Absolutely.
For example, Rotrell Cameron told the officer that what he just saw was cold-blooded. That wasn't in the report, but it was on the body cam, wasn't it?
I didn't see the body cam.
And you didn't ask to see the body cam?
No, I did not.
Because you only saw the body cam that they gave you?
Yes.
Okay. And to be clear, as we're going through the reports, the officers were told by Ms. Cleereman that it had happened, this first swerving incident, had happened a block east or east of Casablanca. Is that correct?
That's one statement that she gave them, but there's also another one.
She stated to Detective Rodolfo Alvarado that it happened east, 1 block east of Casablanca. Isn't that correct?
That's one statement that she gave them, but there is another
that a yes
account.
or no?
No.
She did not say that to Detective Rodolfo Alvarado.
Yes, she did.
She did. And because you never watched Officer Howard's body cam or looked at Detective Washington's report, you're not aware of the extensive efforts that the officers spent on trying to find that on that block east of Casablanca, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay. One moment, Judge. And sir, I want to make sure I have this correct here. You're testifying as to what you're saying is an incomplete investigation, based solely on what one party gave you, without asking for any additional information.
That's correct.
Never wanted to know if there was maybe a report they failed to give you, right?
No.
Never wanted to know if maybe they were holding something back from you that might affect whether or not you thought it was a good investigation?
No.
Never entered your mind?
No.
Not once?
No.
You know that there's tons of body cam, they give you one, never occurs to you to think, maybe I should watch the rest of it?
No.
You know there's multiple 911 calls, never occurs to you to think, man, maybe just for purposes of being thorough, like I'm accusing other people of not, I should listen to everything.
Yes or no?
Yeah, does it occur to
No.
you?
No.
Okay. Nothing else, thank you.
Defense.
Mr. Burems, the state just questioned you about your review of the file as it relates to body cam video, correct?
That's correct.
Is there a way to determine an opinion in the accuracy of an investigation outside of watching hundreds of hours of video?
Yes, there is.
Can you please explain to the members of the jury the other way that you can come to a conclusion based off of the sufficiency and adequacy of the investigation without having to watch hundreds of hours of body cam footage?
The reports, everything that happens in an investigation should be in the reports. and that was my primary source of information in regards to this incident, is reading the reports that were made available to me through the defense and through the police department.
Now, when you speak about reports, is one of those reports named like a supplemental report?
Yes.
Okay. I'm now showing you what is being marked as defense exhibit number D9. Yeah. I'm now showing you what is being marked as D9. I want you to take a look at that and let us know, is that one of the documents you believe that the defense showed to you?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that report indicate?
Objection under hearsay.
Sustained.
Mr. Burems, is your testimony that there was inadequate follow-up with specific locations, in this case based off of a supplemental report such as what you have in your hand?
Yes.
We would now like to move defense exhibit D9 into evidence.
Your Honor, objected to.
I'm sorry.
I'm not dealing with that now. We'll take it up outside the presence of the jury. For right now, denied. It's hearsay. Next question.
Mr. Burems, is there any other reports where they are summary in nature upon which you based your opinions today on?
Just the reports that were made available to me, and also the reports that were not written.
Now, Mr. Burems, is it true that all critical information that's pertinent to a case is supposed to be inside of a narrative report?
That is correct.
And is the purpose of a narrative report to save time so that you don't have to look over voluminous information or footage?
The purpose of a narrative report is to describe everything that was done at a scene, and it should encompass everything that was done at a scene. So it's called a supplement report, and it should actually include everything that is pertinent to the investigation, even if it's in the video footage.
Now, Mr. Burems, is one of the videos that you had occasion to see a poll cam that would be 1 minute and 34 seconds in length?
Yes.
Did you find any issues with the amount of video related to that poll cam video that was accessible?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope.
It's outside the scope. Sustained. The answer is stricken. It's completely outside the scope.
Mr. Burems, are officers trained to include all important details inside each report that they write?
Yes, they are.
And is there any exception to that rule based off the standard operating procedures of the Milwaukee Police Department?
There's no exception to that rule.
Thank you. No further questions.
State.
Just briefly, you stated your primary source of information in regards to this was the police reports, correct?
Yes.
Because everything should be in them, correct?
Yes.
And you never asked for all of them, correct?
That is correct.
Nothing else, thank you.
All right, the witness can step down. Thank you. All right, I need to send the jury out for a couple minutes, hopefully 5 or 10 minutes. It's 4:15. I hope to have you back in 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll go to a little before 5, and I'll let you know exactly how we're proceeding for the next half hour, and then also tomorrow. So if you guys can take a short break, follow my bailiff out. Be back in 10 or 15 minutes. All right, the jury's out. Who's the defense? Next witness, and I think we may have to discuss the parameters of that testimony. Mr. Ahmad.
Judge, let me see if we have any other witness outside. Otherwise, yes, we do need to take up the issue with Dr. Black.
Can I run the bathroom while we do that? I drank a lot of Diet
Fine, 5 minutes max. Then I want the lawyers in their seats in 5 minutes so we can proceed off the record.